Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Zach. I'll start. So, hi, I'm Mike. I'm Chief Product Officer for Brankas. We're an open banking company, a startup in Southeast Asia. I'm currently based in Singapore. Todd, who is also on the call, is based in Manila, along with some of our team. We have teams in Indonesia and Thailand and Vietnam and spread around as well. We're completely remote, as I think most of us are on this call today. So yeah, just going to give a quick overview right now on what Luis is about to demonstrate, and I'll hand over to him after. So Luis is the senior product manager for our bank transfer product called Direct. So in Southeast Asia, bank transfers still encompass the majority of transactions in the likes of the Philippines, Indonesia, and Thailand. Therefore, we've created a product that aggregates bank transfers across multiple banks, allowing a company to solicit both an intrabank and interbank funds transfer via API with the consent of the end user who is sending the funds. So what is key here is that no point do the funds land in our bank account at Brankas. We're not a payment gateway like Stripe, Braintree, Sophia, not like ADN. We don't intend in ever becoming as such. We're completely looking at our open banking rails. Our product has helped businesses in the region with a number of use cases. I'll give some examples for. So example number one is top-ups to e-wallets. So users can now use their bank credentials directly in an e-wallet third-party application to top up using bank transfers. Use case number two is, for example, being able to collect. So there are lenders, especially in Indonesia and the Philippines, are booming at the moment, but they can use our product now to collect funds via facilitation of direct funds transfer at the consent of the end user. Use case number three is that's one. So now people are able to make transactions happen on a third-party e-commerce application like a Lazada or a Shopee. Directly on that application using our Rails. And then finally is bills. The final use case that I have here is the bills payments use case. So people can then pay their bills using the Direct product. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to now hand over to Luis, who will demonstrate how Direct works. So yeah, over to you, Luis.
Okay. Hi, everyone. It's great to meet everyone here. So I'm just going to go over this really quickly. So I hope that you guys can see my Postman right now. So essentially, this is Direct. These two endpoints that you see here, one is our payment initiation endpoint, and the other one is a transactions record retrieval endpoint. It's just a post and a get. It's that's pretty much payment initiations for across multiple banks across different countries in Southeast Asia. We've simplified it to just basically two endpoints, right? The key one that I'm going to be focusing on right now is this payment initiation endpoint that we have here, right? So this payment initiation endpoint simply requires the integrator to specify some very basic details about the transaction, right? So the most important ones being essentially the amount that they want, the value of the transaction, and also the ultimate beneficiary or settlement account that we are supposed to divert the funds to. This is a direct transaction from the end user's account directly into this destination account that they specify. These destination accounts are specified by ID. Right, so it's we assign an internal Brankas identifier for a particular settlement account, and that's logged in our system, and that's basically how our integrators are able to specify the destination of the particular fund transfer. Everything else is just kind of part of the course transaction information. There's a reference ID, which might be the identifier that the integrator uses for tracking a specific transaction on their end via their internal transaction management system. There's stuff about just capturing some basic customer information. Again, this is end user information on their systems. So this is more for reconciliation purposes, for audit purposes, so that they can tie a particular transaction with a particular end user on their product or platform, right? But these are essentially completely optional. This entire object is actually completely optional. And other things are just for the client, which just kind of helps specify the behavior of our end user authentication and authorization environment, which we call the Brankas IDP, which I'll demonstrate after this, after calling this API. But basically, by splitting this out, by just simply creating a simple payment initiation endpoint, which kicks off on the back end all of our, it's like our bank, our integrations with different banks, we're able to deliver two advantages actually, right? The first one is primarily to integrators. One is that we completely abstract the complexities of individual bank integrations from the integrator. So we dramatically simplify the development and maintenance overhead for enabling bank-specific payment options, like via fund transfer, or enabling them when they don't exist, basically. The second one, and the largest one for the banks, is that for a lot of banks here in Southeast Asia, like Philippines and Indonesia, that don't have like proper APIs that they can safely expose to third parties, Brankas works together with these banks to basically take these APIs that they have right now that they have right now and find a way to securely expose that to third parties. That simplifies the integration scenario, but also allows third parties to use what would otherwise be only first-party APIs. Right, so we're able to help banks accelerate their the release of digital banking services by just by abstracting the integration, that entire integration layer, and integrators can simply access those services via our various API products. Right, so I'm just going to call this. I'm just setting a transaction for 100 pesos. Right, I'm just going to call this now. I'm going to call this endpoint. And as you can see here in the response, we get just two very basic things: internal transaction ID. This is the ID that is used, that Brankas assigns to this particular payment initiation, intent. Right. So that's that's the Brankas internal tracker for this particular payment attempt, and there's also the redirect URI. This is the URL the URI that basically end users who are initiating the payment need to be redirected to, so that they can authenticate with their bank and authorize the transaction with their bank. Right. So I'm just going to plop this onto my browser right now. I had one tested earlier. Okay. So as you can see here, if you guys can see my browser now, right? So this is a web service that we call the Brankas Identity Provider Service, right? Or the Brankas IDP. This is our secure end user authentication and authorization environment. And the very first thing, the most important thing that we do as a first step, as part of any transaction flow, is that the end user has to provide informed and explicit consent that they know that an integrator, like a client, is requesting to perform a fund transfer on their behalf. Brankas will perform that fund transfer. Will be performing that fund transfer for them, and in order to orchestrate that fund transfer, we need access to their online banking accounts. Right, we're very transparent about like the exact permissions that we want from the end user, that we need from the end user in order to orchestrate the fund transfer, and we are also very transparent about our terms of use and privacy policy. Right, so assuming that the end user hits approve here, they get immediately redirected to our bank selector page, right? So this, what you're seeing here is a slice of all of the banks that we have here in the Philippines, that we have integrated here with the Philippines right now. This step is actually optional. As our API is flexible enough that if the integrator wants to host a bank selection on their application, the API, it's like this flow will adjust to that. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm just gonna show off all the banks in the Philippines that we so far have enabled. And I'm going to click here on select BPI. BPI, for context, for those not based in the Philippines, is like, I think that they're the second largest bank here in the Philippines right now. So here I'm just going to hit select, and I'm going to be prompted by our service to submit my username and password for my online banking account with this particular bank. Right. So I think a couple of things to note here is that we take every precaution to ensure that this environment is secure for the end user, and ensure that all information that is being exchanged over this service is directly exchanged between the end user and the bank that they have selected. Right. It's like there's no third party in the middle other than Brankas, which is just forwarding that information to the bank, right? Which is just invoking that login, essentially the authentication endpoint of the bank. A way to think about a better way to think about this is basically for a lot of banks that don't have a proper OAuth 2 service that sitting in front of like third-party exposed APIs, we provide that layer, that third-party exposure layer through this service, right? So it's OAuth 2 off the box, basically exposing first-party APIs in a fashion that is safe to consume for end users and for third parties, right? Before anyone asks, no, it's like we never store any sensitive end user banking information on our systems as well, whether it's data or access to our to their digital to their online banking assets, right? And also an important thing to note here is that all banks have different authentication requirements. For this particular bank, for BPI, it's just a simple username and password, but for certain banks, they require different types of TFAs as part of the authentication flow. Some actually are starting to support OAuth 2, and so it's like, so regardless of what the authentic end user authentication flow is, the service just simply automatically adjusts to it based on the bank and based on the settings of the end user has for their online banking account with that bank. So I'm just going to log in very quickly right now. This is, by the way, this is an actual live bank account. I am transacting with real money, by the way. Right. So now I'm just going to be logging in, and immediately I get sent to our account selection page. I currently only have a single account linked to this online banking account, but assuming that the end user had like 5 different accounts here, it's like we would be showing all those 5. We just simply display some basic information. It's like the amount, the balance, the current balance of that account, the masked, obviously, account number, and also the account holder name. I set the name of this one to unknown because I didn't want to, it's like just for security purposes, because I didn't want to broadcast the owner of this particular bank account, right? So I'm just going to select this one. After this, we immediately go to a transaction summary page, right? More data is coming here. It's like we're trying to build more full-fledged transaction summary data. But essentially, once the end user confirms the amount that needs to be transferred, I just need to hit confirm, and that triggers the transaction authorization TFA. For the case of BPI, it requires in-app authorization. So actually, right now, I am opening my mobile banking app for BPI. And I need to authorize the transaction basically via biometrics, right? So I'm just doing that right now, authorizing the transaction via my application, proving it, waiting for the bank to respond. Okay, got confirmation on my app, and yeah, transaction success, right? And that's direct in a nutshell, basically. It's like regardless of what the flow of the bank is or what the current state of their APIs are, it's like we give them a way to expose that to the market, basically, in a seamless fashion, right? A couple things to note here on the success page, right? So at the end of this flow, there are 3 things that are going to happen. One is going to be the redirection, which should be kicking off any second now because it redirects automatically after 1 minute. On that redirection, back to the client application, they specify a return path URL for us, basically. And what we do is that we append certain query parameters to that return path, so that we can just basic information like the transaction ID, the Brankas transaction ID for the relevant transaction, and also the status, right? We also provide a callback to their systems to informing their back end that, hey, by the way, this transaction was completed, right? And additionally, it's like they always have access to our get endpoint, our transaction retrieval endpoint, so they can always verify at any time the current state of a particular transaction, whether created, completed, or ongoing. I set it to redirect here to Brankas, and as you can see here, simply redirected me to Brankas and attach those query parameters, which client applications can simply listen for to get to understand what transaction was just completed and what the final status of that transaction was, right? So, but yeah, that's direct in a nutshell, right? So 2 main things is like we completely simplify we abstract all of this, the nitty-gritty of integrations, maintaining integrations with multiple banks from integrators, and at the same time, we provide an easy way, a simplified way for banks to expose whatever current API services they have, even if it's serving first-party applications, and expose that to the market in a secure fashion that protects the data and privacy of the end user, and also gives them a secure channel through which they can authenticate and authenticate their end users and receive authorization. Right? That's pretty much it